A woman drank 35% hydrogen peroxide at lunchtime. This is what happened to her brain. KJ is a 40-year-old woman presenting to the emergency room with her eyes wide open, but she was completely unresponsive. She was foaming at the mouth. You see, KJ could never remember a time in her life when she was healthy. When she was young, she had an eating disorder that would periodically put her in the hospital. Oftentimes, doctors would document that she had an acute onset psychosis with delusions and hallucinations because of hypoglycemia. Hypo meaning low, glyce from Greek referring to glucose or sugar, and emia meaning presence in blood. Her erratic eating habits caused hypoglycemia, which can cause changes in one's mental status resulting in hallucinations, delusions, and acute onset psychosis. Skin deep, this could have been the cause of all of her problems, but there was a lot more going on. KJ eventually got the help that she needed for her eating disorder, but she never really seemed to get healthier. She was always sick with a cold or the flu. Sometimes she'd have a headache and couldn't go to school because of it. She was always exhausted. She'd get a rash on her face if she was out in the sun for too long, and she'd have body aches and chills before eventually acute onset psychosis would bring her back to the hospital. To KJ, these were serious issues, but to everyone else, she was being a drama queen. Oh, you have a headache? Well, you sleep too late at night, her mom would say. Oh, you have a rash on your face after being in the sun. What a big surprise. That's called sunburn, sweetie, Mom would say. At doctor's visits, her mom would often interject when the doctor asked a question. Mom downplayed all of KJ's signs and symptoms, giving doctors the impression that things weren't as severe as KJ had described. And sometimes, Mom would just refuse to bring KJ to the hospital, locking KJ in her room, telling her to figure it all out herself. As an adult, KJ couldn't understand why she felt so awful all the time, but she just accepted it as fact. Maybe she did feel fine, that it was all in her head, so maybe she should just keep quiet, she thought. In the hospital for an acute onset psychosis at the age of 24, doctors put KJ on antipsychotic medicines, but she didn't need antipsychotic medicines. When she was ready to go home, the nurse involved in her care wrote a name and a phone number on a card and urged KJ to call it and schedule an appointment. Not wanting to step on doctors' toes, the nurse had suspected that KJ had autoimmune disease, where the immune system attacks the body. The nurse brought it up on psychiatric rounds. The blood tests were borderline. The signs and symptoms were non-specific, meaning that they could have been a variety of different things, but everything was shrugged off. At the rheumatology doctor's office, KJ was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, also known as lupus. This made sense with all of her problems, the rash on her face, the flare-ups, always getting sick, the muscle aches and pains, and the acute onset psychosis. Lupus is a time when the immune system is actively attacking the body, and having the diagnosis finally brought KJ to peace. Her health problems weren't in her mind. Her mom was wrong. She wasn't being a drama queen, and doctors were overlooking this, and they didn't have KJ's health in their best interests, she thought. She took medicines for this lupus, and everything was okay. But a few years later, things started to get worse again. KJ had swelling in her hands and feet. She had trouble with her shoulders and hips, as doctors determined that her immune system had been attacking them to the point of rheumatoid arthritis, where the immune system starts attacking the bones and joints, causing permanent damage. This new disease would mean that she would have to take more medicines, and even then, there's no guarantee that she won't need things like a hip replacement later in life, given how aggressively her immune system had been attacking her joints. But KJ had had enough. She had been taking all these medicines for her lupus for all these years, and she didn't get any better. She ended up developing even more disease, she thought. And now, with this arthritis, doctors wanted her to take this cocktail of medicines that she couldn't even afford. If they had only taken her more seriously when she was younger, maybe all of this could have been prevented, she thought, as she went online and tried to find her own therapies. A while back, someone had recommended to KJ about these alternative therapies for her lupus. At first, it was smelling some oils, and she didn't really feel much better, maybe a little. But as she dived deeper into this space, she came across hydrogen peroxide therapy. The communities online were adamant. Hydrogen peroxide is basically water with an extra oxygen. You're not just having a glass of H2O, you're going to be chugging a glass of H2O too. And without a doubt, that oxygen is totally what KJ's body needed, because when extra oxygen is present, bad things can't happen to your cells. And you know, the immune system attacking your body is just bad things happening to your cells. So definitely, to fix KJ's body, she needed this oxygen. KJ was skeptical at first because she knew these alternative therapies could be suspect. Maybe something was there, but nothing was standard. None of the communities agreed on a route of administration for this because the truth is, you really shouldn't be putting this in your body. Some sources said to infuse it directly into the blood, but KJ wasn't going to do that. Some sources said do not take by mouth, but others said it was fine so long as it was diluted. In the end, KJ decided that she would start by diluting some and rubbing it on her skin so that the oxygen will absorb right into her body. And after a few weeks, as she got more comfortable, she would start diluting the hydrogen peroxide to drink. And this is what she did. KJ would purchase 35% food-grade hydrogen peroxide bottles from big box retail stores. She read online that refrigerating the 35% peroxide would help stabilize it chemically, so she'd put it in her fridge right alongside her food. It was food-grade anyways, so no problem here, she thought. One day, KJ transferred the 35% hydrogen peroxide into clear gallon water jugs. She only drank distilled water now because tap water had impurities that she believed made her lupus worse. She didn't know why when she bought the hydrogen peroxide from the store that it came in an opaque bottle. She made her own inference that the peroxide needed to absorb
what's
energy
up?
and positive vibes
Bows,
around it so that when it was in her body, it would just cure her of all the autoimmunity that plagued her organs and joints. 35% hydrogen peroxide is dangerous. If left on the skin, it can be corrosive because it reacts and does in fact release a bunch of oxygen.
Thank you, sir.
KJ made an effort to make sure that she marked the water bottles as hydrogen peroxide, but this time she was distracted and forgot and put them back into the fridge without marking them. One day at lunchtime, KJ was thirsty and needed to drink some water. She reached in for a bottle and poured herself a cup, and this time for real, she was drinking H2O2. 35%. Immediately after taking a couple of sips of the concentrated hydrogen peroxide solution, she could feel it fizz and bubble on the way down. At first, she was panicked and didn't know what was happening because she could just feel air blow right out of her nose. But then she realized that she drank the concentrated solution. She had been meaning to increase the concentration anyways so that she could optimize the amount of oxygen in her body. And this was the last thing that she
just breathe.
As she collapsed
just
to the floor,
drink a glass of water and then breathe 2
came
times.
To see the commotion as KJ became completely unresponsive, even though her eyes were wide open as she was foaming at the mouth. And they call for 911, and she's brought to the emergency room where we are now. At examination, doctors find that KJ's blood pressure was high and she had a decreased level of consciousness. No one knew that she drank 35% hydrogen peroxide, although they suspected she might have consumed something because she was foaming at the mouth. What doctors did know for sure was that KJ only had reflexes on one side of her body. This is called hemiplegia. Hemi meaning half and plegia referring to paralysis. KJ was paralyzed on one side of her body, meaning that something could be wrong with her brain, giving doctors some clues as to what's happening. A scan of KJ's brain revealed that parts of it were ischemic. Isk derived from Greek meaning a holding back of, and emia meaning presence of blood. So parts of KJ's brain weren't getting enough blood flow and therefore not getting enough oxygen, which could explain why she's paralyzed on one side of her body. But
ironic.
How does something like this happen with hydrogen peroxide? It's supposed to hyperoxygenate parts of the body, right? That's what they say. But what's happening to KJ is a result of too much oxygen present, and so much that it's blocking blood flow in her brain. You see, when hydrogen peroxide comes in contact with human tissue, it reacts. The reason why chemicals react is so that they can become more stable, meaning that hydrogen peroxide, when it's concentrated like 35%, can be a little unstable. It breaks down to water, that's stable, and oxygen, also stable. But when it does this, it releases a lot of heat. In almost all known living beings, cells have metabolic activity, so they're creating and using energy to function.
Alright, so she got paralyzed.
Is the production
I get
of
it.
some hydrogen
Could have said that
peroxide.
faster. If you didn't have to repeat all the Greek words in every single one of your videos.